A normal school day suddenly turned into a deadly game and losing meant instant death. One moment you're in class, the next, you're playing a daring version of Squid Games with a Daruma doll that will explode your head if you move. From there, it only gets crazier. Each game is more bizarre and more brutal than the previous, and no one knows who's behind it or how to survive. This is the recap of the movie As the Gods Will. A wild, twisted ride where childhood games become a fight for your life. Enjoy the story. At the beginning of the movie, we hear a voice lamenting to God about how dull and uneventful life has become. It was the voice of Shun, a seemingly average student, whose life is about to be turned upside down. He, along with his friends Amaya and Ichika, is introduced during an ordinary college day, but what begins as routine quickly turns into a nightmare. Inside the classroom, Shun and his classmates suddenly find themselves trapped with a dangerous Daruma doll placed on the teacher's desk. The students are forced to play a deadly game called Daruma-San Koronda. The rules of the game are brutal. Whenever the doll sings and turns around, any student caught moving is instantly killed and their bodies are instantly reduced to red marbles. The students immediately start to panic as they realize that they are now trapped in a deadly game. With no knowledge of how the game works and no way out, chaos erupts among them. As some of the students attempt to escape, they eventually discover that the classroom doors are locked. The two boys who had made a run for it were immediately caught and eliminated. In the meantime, one student, who is a gamer boy, looks at the doll closely to investigate the message on its back. The message reveals that the game will end only if the button behind the doll is pressed. They had a flicker of hope for a moment and one of the students quickly makes a desperate dash to press the button, but the doll turns around before he could reach the button and kills him. That was when Shun notices a hidden timer counting down on the back of the doll, and he realizes time is quickly running out for them. Now in panic, multiple students attempt to press the button in a frenzy, only to be picked off one by the doll. Eventually, only Shun and the gamer boy were the surviving two left in the room. The floor is littered with red marbles which were the remains of their classmates, and this makes it nearly impossible to move forward without slipping. So, with mere seconds left on the timer, the gamer boy tells Shun to use his back as a stepping stone to reach the button. In a desperate attempt to beat the timer, Shun runs forward and makes the leap. He manages to press the button just in time to end the game. As they begin to celebrate their survival, the Daruma doll unexpectedly declares Shun the sole winner and kills the gamer boy. Then, the movie scene abruptly shifts to Shun's past, back at the time when life was uneventful. He's shown playing video games, flipping through TV channels at home, and walking through school with his gamer friend. He spots Ichika riding on her bike and she smiles at him. But when his friend urges him to ask her out, Shun insists he only sees her as a friend. The flashback continues as Shun and his friend sees a boy being bullied by Amaya. Earlier that morning in school, inside the classroom, Shun had fallen asleep during lectures, until a loud sound jolted him awake. Then suddenly his teacher's head explodes, and the Daruma doll makes its terrifying entrance, looping the story back to where it began. Back in the present, Shun, who is traumatized by the experience, begins praying for his old, boring life to return. But his nightmare is far from over. The Daruma doll straightaway tells him he's just a mouse, and a cat is coming for him. Meanwhile, Ichika soon arrives at Shun's class and she is horrified by what she sees. When Shun asks if she knows what's going on, she says that she's just as confused as he is and she too has just had a similar experience. When Shun and Ichika try to call the police, they discover that there's no cell signal. Panicking, they rush to flee the school only to discover that every exit and door is locked tight. Feeling trapped, they run toward the basketball court, hoping to find safety there. Luckily, the door was open, but instead of finding help, they stumbled upon a bizarre scene as they found students dressed in mice costumes. They eventually discover that they were all survivors from the game. As the camera zooms out, we see a chilling message written on the court. It tells them that in order to win their next game, they will have to fit the cat's bell for it to end. Immediately, the student council president orders everyone to wear the mice costumes. However, before he could force them to comply, the court floor splits open and a massive plastic cat rises from beneath. The monstrous cat immediately begins devouring students one after another, throwing the group into chaos. In the midst of the madness, Shun spots a ball-shaped bell on the court making a ticking sound like a timer. That was when he realizes that the key to ending the game is to shoot the bell through the hoop attached to the cat's neck before the ball times out. Immediately, the most skilled basketball player amongst them attempts the shot, but the cat catches the ball mid-air and throws it back at him, killing him on the spot. After this, Shun deduces that the cat only targets those in the mouse costumes. So, he urges everyone to take them off, and for a moment, the cat stops attacking. Relief washes over the group, until the cat suddenly devours another student, triggering a fresh round of panic altogether. As everyone scrambles to keep away from the monster, Ichika falls. Seeing this, Shun immediately puts on the costume to draw the cat's attention away from her. To his surprise, he suddenly realizes that wearing the outfit lets him hear the cat's thoughts. He discovers that the creature isn't actually hunting them, rather it's just tired and asking for someone to scratch its back so it can sleep peacefully. With this understanding, Shun decides to climb onto the cat's back and start scratching it. He calls on the others to help, and eventually, the cat dozes off. Seizing the chance, Shun grabs the bell and prepares to make the basket, but the other students stop him. They were convinced that only the person who made the basket would win the game and condemn others to death. Tensions soon build up among them, and as they argue, the cat wakes up once more and resumes its attack. Thinking of a way to end the game, Shun decides to conceal the bell inside a normal basketball to fool the cat. He took Ichika along in order to confuse the cat as they made the shot. As he and Ichika throw the ball toward the hoop, the bell bounces off the rim. However, Amaya suddenly arrives, catches the ball and makes the winning shot in the nick of time to end the game. In the end, the cat declares that although the game is over, only Shun, Ichika, and Amaya are allowed to live. Shun asks about the others, but before he gets an answer, he sees that Amaya had already massacred the remaining survivors, claiming its gods will that only the strong survive. He tells Shun that they're alike and that they are both destined to survive. However, Ichika doesn't agree with him, and she tells Amaya that Shun is nothing like him, rather Shun is more kind, stronger, smarter. Angered by her words, Amaya rushes towards her, but before he can strike, the cat releases a knockout gas that renders all of them unconscious. Meanwhile, the news had already spread about the deaths occurring in various schools, and the news broadcast ties the horrifying events to a nationwide terrorist attack. Reports also break out about massive cubes hovering above cities worldwide. Although the military and police forces attempt to breach them, all entrants are sealed. As panic spreads, the rumor starts to spread that the survivors of the earlier mysterious incident are God's children, the only ones seemingly capable of enduring these bizarre trials. Some experts, including a university professor, label the events as the beginning of an alien invasion which will target humanity itself. Meanwhile, a homeless man who was walking by a group of old men listening to a broken radio, stops and touches the radio, and all of a sudden it begins to work. This left the men in total wonder. Back inside one of the floating cubes, Shun regains consciousness. He soon discovers that he is not alone. Among the other trapped survivors, he sees Takumi, his childhood friend, alongside a frightened schoolgirl named Tiara and an arrogant student named Tauka. Shun is devastated once he realizes that he has just entered another game. He tries to escape, but like the previous games, all the exits are sealed. That was when Tauka tells him that the only way to survive is by winning the game in the room, and that he tells them that his intelligence should help them secure victory. Moments later, a screen appears in the room and tells them about the next game. The players must find hidden keys which will aid them in their escape from the cube. Then, 4 floating wooden Kokeshi dolls enter the room. They cheerfully explain the rules and tell them that each player will be blindfolded while the dolls sing and circle round them. When the song stops, the player must guess which doll is behind them. A wrong guess means instant death. However, if the player guesses correctly, one doll will explode and they will receive the key to the next level. The arrogant Tauka volunteers to go first, but he fails and he is instantly eliminated. Tiara follows, and also meets a tragic end. The dolls then move toward Takumi, but Shun steps forward to take her place. He surprises the dolls by guessing the correct option, and in the end he reveals to them that he had tricked them. He had actually used his phone to secretly record the dolls' voices earlier, and when he had compared their voices, he had guessed who was behind him. Amazed at his intelligence, one of the Kokeshi dolls explodes and eventually leaves Shun and Takumi with the key. So they leave the room and enter the next level of the cube. All of a sudden, a young boy is seen being chased by a bizarre-looking doll. So, the boy quickly rushes toward them and begs them to hold his hand. Apparently, the dolls cannot harm people who are physically connected through friendship. Immediately Shun and Takumi grab his hands, the creepy doll backs off, admitting that it was jealous of their bond. At that moment, Shun notices the pendant Takumi is wearing around her neck, that it was a handle from a broken teacup, triggering a flashback. Years ago, Takumi had gone to a rooftop, preparing to end her life when she noticed Shun nearby, smashing cups against a wall to vent his anger. He had handed her a cup and invited her to do the same. Breaking the cups had helped her cope with her depression, and she had kept the handle ever since. Back in the present, they hear a sudden scream piercing the air. They quickly run toward the sound and find that it is Ichika who is trying to run away from the same monstrous doll. Immediately Shun sees this. He leaps forward and grabs her hand, which eventually saves her just in the nick of time. Soon after, a wall in a room nearby collapses and reveals another mysterious face of a doll having 7 key slots. Shun and his group eventually arrive at the room, where 2 contestants are already waiting. They counted their keys and found that there were only 4 in total, and they needed 3 more to complete the total required. Suddenly, Amaya appears, holding the final 3 keys. As soon as he enters the room, he kills his companion, knowing that only 7 contestants are allowed to advance. When they inserted all 7 into the slots, the doll face announces their victory and retracts into the wall, revealing a hidden passage. Then a voice instructs them to wear the provided costumes and proceed forward. At that moment, we see that the entire game is being broadcast live across the country. In the meantime, as they move forward, the group enters a chilling, frozen chamber. Then a towering polar bear emerges and introduces himself. He declares that he hates liars and those with black hearts. The rules of the next game are simple: tell the truth and they live. But anyone caught lying will be executed. The game begins with a seemingly harmless question: what's your favorite food? After everyone answers, the bear accuses someone of lying. They are given 2 minutes to identify the liar or they will all be eliminated. Although they initially defend each other, suspicion eventually falls on the contestant who answered parsley. So the bear crushes him without mercy. The next question is more personal: do you like Shun? Those familiar with him say yes and the others say no. But once again, the bear senses that someone has lied. Now under pressure, the group accuses Takumi, claiming she hadn't been in contact with Shun for a long time. Despite Shun's desperate pleas to spare her, the bear eventually kills her. Overcome with grief, Shun explodes in rage and accuses the bear himself of being the true liar. To everyone's shock, this accusation is correct. The bear's white fur suddenly starts to dissolve, revealing his true form, a black bear. The lies have been exposed, so the game ends and the remaining contestants are now taken to the final round. They were led to a mysterious temple. As the doors open, they are greeted by 3 animated wooden dolls who introduce themselves as fitness, intelligence, and imagination. They congratulate the contestants for surviving the previous rounds and introduce the final game: kick the can for it to end. In this game, 1 participant will take on the role of the demon. The rest will be victims. When the demon places the can at its designated spot, the victims are allowed to hide. The demon's task is to find them, identify them by name, and lock them in cells. If he captures all the victims and then kicks the can, he wins. However, if even 1 victim manages to kick the can before being caught, they and the remaining victims will win the game, except for the one who kicks the can. That player will die, as the can will explode immediately he kicks it. With everything on the line, the final 5 players gather for this last deadly game. Each of them draws a stick, and the one with the red tip takes on the role of the demon. Amaya ends up with the red stick and he immediately sets the can on the ground and begins hunting down the others. The other 2 students are quickly captured, and in a desperate act to spare Shun, Ichika sacrifices herself to distract Amaya, allowing Shun to escape. So, Amaya imprisons Ichika and the other 2 as he boldly declares that he doesn't even need to catch Shun to win. However, Shun figures out a plan. All of a sudden, despite Ichika's pleas for him to stay hidden, he reappears in a full armored suit and hides his face with a helmet. He confidently taunts Amaya, saying he can't be caught if his face isn't seen. Amused by his logic, Amaya pulls off Shun's helmet and then moves away to kick the can, believing victory is now his. But in a shocking twist, he finds himself trapped as Shun has attached an iron chain to him, tying him to the armored suit. Suddenly, Shun drops into the water, dragging Amaya along. As Amaya catches himself at the edge and fights to pull Shun out, he realizes Shun has ditched the armor and is now inching toward the can. Breaking free at the very last moment, Amaya makes a final dash, but Shun beats him to it and kicks the can as they both brace themselves for the explosion. However, nothing happens. The game ends, and the dolls announce that everyone except Amaya is a winner. They reveal that the explosion was just a ruse to heighten the tension in the game. Furious, Amaya lashes out, claiming he was chosen by God. The dolls then laugh and tell him that no one was ever meant to die in this game, meaning they will all live. To celebrate their survival, fireworks erupt and fill the sky as the victors are handed celebratory ice cream. As Shun confesses his feelings to Ichika and asks her out on a date when they get out of the cube, they suddenly notice a writing on their popsicle sticks. Then, the dolls unveil the final twist of the game, that their final survival still depends on luck. Shun and Amaya's sticks read, "You live," but the other 3, including Ichika's, read, "You die." The dolls immediately execute the losers and Ichika vanishes right before Shun's eyes. In the end, Shun and Amaya emerge from the cube as the people watching from the ground give them roaring cheers. The crowd hails them as God's children, and although Amaya is overjoyed, Shun is devastated by the deaths of his friends and he falls to his knees, declaring that there is no God. One of the dolls leans in and replies, "God does exist," and the film ends as we see that the same homeless man shown earlier in the movie was God all along. And that is the story of the movie, As the Gods Will. If this recap had you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know if you would have survived this game. Until our next recap, stay safe.